Let's be honest. Money breaks more hearts than love ever could. I know because it nearly broke mine. It wasn't one big disaster. No stolen fortune, no tragic loss. Just a slow grinding shame that came from living a normal life, paying bills, chasing comfort, and still feeling like a failure every time I checked my balance. One night, someone I love said, "You talk about money like it's an enemy." And I said, "That's because it's the only thing that's ever made me feel small." The room went quiet after that, the kind of silence that hums like guilt. Later, after they went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table under the flicker of a cheap bulb. My wallet sat there, open like a wound, cracked leather, folded receipts, a photo of a younger me who still believed that financial freedom would mean peace. I remember staring at that photo and realizing something awful. I've built my entire adult life trying to escape the same fear that raised me, the fear of not having enough. And worse, I'd learned how to make it look respectable. I called it ambition. I've worn that fear like a suit. I've dressed it up in spreadsheets and savings goals, but it's still fear. Every time I got a raise, I'd celebrate for one night and wake up the next morning already anxious about the next milestone. It's like being on a treadmill that only speeds up when you start to rest. That's the thing about money. It's supposed to make you feel safe, but somewhere along the way, it started deciding who I was allowed to be. I used to joke that I wasn't addicted to spending, just addicted to control. But control is a liar. It promises security and delivers exhaustion. The kettle on the counter began to hiss, a small reminder that not everything in life needs to be managed. Steam rose, fogging the little window above the sink. In that blur, I saw my own reflection. Tired eyes, jaw too tight, trying too hard. I whispered to myself, when did safety start to feel like luxury? Abraham Maslow once said, "What is necessary to change a person is to change their awareness of themselves." And maybe that's the real problem. We've built a culture that worships wealth but forgets what safety feels like. We chase rich and forget secure. We want abundance but never stop to ask, abundance for what? I grew up thinking rich people had peace. Now, I know peace is its own currency, and most of us are overdrafted. I took a slow breath and opened the wallet again. The smell of worn leather, the weight of coins, the quiet guilt of receipts from things I bought to feel alive. Each crease felt like a chapter of the same story, trying to prove I matter. But I've learned something: wealth begins the moment you stop apologizing for needing safety. That realization doesn't come easy. It comes in nights like this, when the world's asleep and you're arguing with a wallet that never talks back. It comes when you finally stop asking, "Do I have enough?" and start asking, "Do I feel enough?" I looked again at that photo, the 20-something version of me who thought life would get easier once he earned more. I wanted to tell him, it's not about more, it's about meaning. Maybe that's what Maslow was really saying, that peace is the floor you stand on, not the prize at the top. That the point isn't to climb out of fear, it's to build a life steady enough to rest in. Outside, a car alarm blared, quick and sharp, like the world reminding me it's never completely quiet. Still, I sat there, breathing in the small, ordinary truth of that moment. I am not failing. I am human. And being human costs something, but it's worth every penny. I zipped the wallet shut. The sound was gentle, final, like a line drawn not between rich and poor, but between fear and faith. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to check my balance. I felt the urge to start balancing my life. And that, I think, is the real price of enough. The next morning, the phone buzzed again. That familiar vibration, small, harmless, but sharp enough to pierce peace. A bank notification. I didn't even need to open it. My body already knew what to do. Tense shoulders, shallow breath, that quiet panic rising like static under the skin. It's strange how quickly fear can borrow the shape of routine. The message wasn't new. It never is. Deposit, withdrawal, low balance, credit reminder, a language I know too well. I tell myself it's just information, but my nervous system treats it like a verdict. For years, I've lived with this quiet contradiction. I want to feel safe, but I keep feeding the same thoughts that make me scared. Every purchase feels like a confession, every paycheck like an apology. It's exhausting, pretending to be calm while your chest is on fire. I once thought anxiety was a lack of discipline, that if I budgeted harder, earned smarter, hustled longer, the noise in my head would go quiet. But the truth is simpler and crueler. I didn't need more control. I needed more compassion. When you grow up watching adults panic over bills, you learn early that money isn't neutral. It's emotional. It's survival. It's power. It's silence. I remember my mother whispering at the kitchen table, "Don't tell your father we're short again." I remember my father saying, "Don't worry, we'll manage," his jaw tight with fear. I learned to smile while I worried, to perform stability I didn't feel, to measure worth in what I could hide. And now, decades later, here I am, an adult with a decent income and the same child's reflex. Shame before safety. I open my wallet, the old leather one, still carrying the ghosts of every decision I've ever second-guessed. The receipts have stories. Grocery store runs where I picked the cheaper brand and felt proud. Late-night takeout after a brutal week, followed by guilt. A birthday gift that cost more than I could justify. Each slip of paper a small record of wanting both comfort and control, and never quite trusting myself with either. Sometimes, I look at people who seem free around money, who buy coffee without overthinking, who plan vacations without flinching, and I envy their ease. I mistake it for wisdom, but maybe it's just peace, that rare currency we forget to earn. I know what Maslow meant now, when he talked about safety. He wasn't just describing a roof or a paycheck. He was talking about the deep, quiet knowing that you are allowed to exist without proving your value, that you deserve warmth before achievement. But no one teaches that. Instead, we learn to speak the language of more income, more security, more future. We forget to ask, for what? Sometimes I wonder if the real poverty of our time isn't financial at all. It's emotional. We are rich in advice, poor in grace. We can automate savings, but not self-worth. We can track spending, but not peace. And that's the part I'm learning to name. The wound behind the wallet. The fear that no spreadsheet can fix. I close my eyes and imagine what it would feel like to check my balance without judgment. Just curiosity. Just truth. Maybe that's the beginning of healing. When money stops being a mirror for fear and becomes a mirror for care. I run my thumb over the wallet's edge again. The leather is softer now, the corners more forgiving. Maybe I can learn to be that way with myself. The phone buzzes once more, and this time I look not to punish, but to understand. The numbers are what they are, but for the first time they don't define me. They're just numbers. I'm still here, still breathing, still enough. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day meant for rest, but never quite peaceful for me. I was sitting on the couch, half watching a documentary about people who retired early, pretending not to be comparing my life to theirs. The sunlight was soft, but my thoughts weren't. Bills on the counter, unread emails, the faint hum of worry that never really goes away. Then I heard a small voice behind me. It wasn't accusatory or dramatic. Just curious. "Dad," she asked, "are we rich?" The world seemed to pause. I looked over my shoulder and saw her standing there, hair a mess, chocolate on her sleeve, eyes wide and waiting. She wasn't asking about status. She was asking about safety, about whether the world we lived in could hold her. And I didn't know how to answer. Every explanation I rehearsed in my head sounded hollow. "We're fine. We're okay. We have what we need. But even as I thought those words, my chest tightened, because beneath them lived the real fear. What if enough disappears? I tried to smile. Why do you ask? She shrugged. You always look worried when you check your phone. It was such a simple observation, innocent, but sharp enough to pierce everything I'd been hiding. Children have a way of telling the truth adults spend years avoiding. I picked up my phone, glanced at the last notification, and laughed softly. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. My daughter didn't see money. She saw my relationship with fear. The wallet sat beside me on the table. I reached for it without thinking. The leather was warm from the sun, and when I opened it, the photo slipped out. The same one of my younger self. It fluttered onto the rug, face down. I stared at it for a moment before picking it up. The back of the photo was blank except for a faint crease running through the middle. I turned it over, and there he was, 25, hopeful, unguarded. The version of me who believed peace would come after the promotion, after the savings goal, after the proof. But peace never came after. It waited here, inside this moment, quiet, unglamorous, asking to be noticed. I looked at my daughter again. Yes, I said finally, we are rich. Maybe not the kind of rich people talk about, but we have a roof, dinner waiting, and each other. That's a good start. She smiled, satisfied, and ran off to chase the dog down the hall. The sound of her laughter filled the room, bouncing off the walls like sunlight. And there it was, the realization I'd been circling for years. I wasn't chasing wealth. I was chasing safety. I just didn't know that safety had already been living here, asking for my attention through the people I loved. I sat there a long time, holding the photo, watching the light crawl slowly across the floor. The fear that used to tighten my chest loosened its grip. Maybe this is what healing feels like. Not a dramatic transformation, but a quiet permission to stop running. The wallet rested open beside me. No longer a reminder of lack, but of life. The proof of every time I made it through. Sometimes being rich means not being afraid to lose. I slipped the photo back inside and closed the zipper carefully, as if sealing a promise. The sound was soft, final, almost like forgiveness. Outside, the sky was turning gold. Inside, something lighter settled in my chest. Not certainty, but peace. Enough for today. That night, after the house went quiet, I found myself reaching for a book I hadn't opened in years. Toward A Psychology of Being by Abraham Maslow. The spine was creased, the pages soft from time. I flipped through it the way people flip through old journals, half looking for themselves. Maslow wrote that we climb toward meaning only after our basic needs are safe: food, rest, belonging, security. He called it a hierarchy, but to me, it felt more like a map I'd been trying to run backward. I'd been chasing the top, self-worth, freedom, confidence, while standing on shaky ground. No wonder I was tired. I traced a line he'd underlined years ago. What is necessary to change a person is to change their awareness of themselves. That sentence sat there, patient, waiting. Awareness of myself, not my salary, not my potential, not the future version I keep auditioning for. Just me, here, breathing. I closed my eyes and let that truth sink in. Awareness changes everything. It doesn't erase fear, it puts it in context. Fear, after all, is just the body asking, am I safe? And maybe for most of my life, I kept answering, not yet. I opened my wallet again. The same bills, the same photo, but something felt different. I saw not what was missing, but what had endured the fingerprints of every moment I'd survived. It reminded me that money had never been the enemy, fear was, and fear, when understood, can become direction. Maslow wasn't telling me to stop striving. He was saying, before you climb, strengthen the ground you stand on. Stability isn't weakness, it's wisdom. So I tried something new that night, a small ritual, Almost embarrassingly simple. I renamed one of my savings folders on the bank app Peace Fund. I didn't fill it with big plans, just intention. $10 to begin, not because it would change my life, but because it would remind me that safety is allowed to start small. Then I pulled a small notebook from the drawer and wrote one honest sentence. Today, I spent less time fearing money and more time understanding it. It wasn't perfect, but it was true. I think that's what Maslow meant by self-actualization. Not perfection, but presence. The willingness to live truthfully inside your own life. To stop outsourcing peace to the next milestone. For so long, I thought growth was about climbing. More work, more status, more control. But lately, I've begun to suspect it's about rooting. Learning to stay. Learning to trust the ground under your feet. When I finished writing, I placed the wallet beside the notebook. The two looked oddly similar, both full of stories, both proof of where I've been. I smiled at the thought. Maybe wisdom isn't found in climbing higher, but in realizing how much of your ladder is already built. Outside, a light rain began. The sound against the window was steady, soothing. The kind of sound that tells you the world can be unpredictable and still be gentle. I sipped my tea, feeling that strange, humble gratitude that comes after an honest conversation with yourself. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was managing my life. I felt like I was inhabiting it. Security isn't small, it's sacred. It's the floor we stand on to reach higher. I whispered that line out loud, not as philosophy, but as a promise. And for once, I didn't need to climb. I just needed to rest on the floor I had already built. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the slow rhythm of rain outside. Something inside me felt different. Not dramatic, just clear. I didn't want to fix my relationship with money anymore. I wanted to befriend it. Maslow's words echoed again. Safety before meaning. I realized safety wasn't just a condition. It was a practice. Something I could build moment by moment. So I asked myself, what does safety look like today? I reached for my wallet. It was still there on the nightstand. Same creased leather, same weight. But this time, instead of scanning for proof of scarcity, I looked for evidence of care. This wallet had seen me through storms and paychecks, nights of doubt and small victories. It had never left my side, and maybe that was my first lesson. Gratitude before guilt. 1. The gratitude pause. Before checking the bank app, I closed my eyes and said quietly, thank you for what stayed. Not to anyone in particular, maybe to life, maybe to time. It's amazing how quickly perspective changes when you replace comparison with thanks. Gratitude doesn't erase bills or responsibilities. It simply shifts where the light falls. When I stop counting what's missing, I begin to see what's already holding me. I wrote down 3 things that make me feel secure. Not just financially, but emotionally. My ability to cook a simple meal. The friend who texts, "Did you eat yet?" The fact that I keep showing up, even on tired days. Those 3 things cost almost nothing. Yet they built a kind of wealth my statements could never show. 2. The 10-minute review. Later that day, I opened the wallet and went through it slowly. A ritual I now call the 10-minute review. I touched each receipt before deciding whether to keep it. It wasn't about accounting, it was about awareness. There was a coffee I bought for a friend, a grocery bill from last week, a donation slip to a food drive. For the first time, I saw these not as expenses, but as traces of life. Proof that my resources moved toward connection, not waste. Then I set aside one receipt. The impulse online purchase that made me sigh after the confirmation email. I didn't judge it. I simply wrote beside it, what was I trying to feel? The answer surprised me. Seen. That's what money had become for me. A translator for needs I didn't know how to name. Safety, recognition, belonging, control. And naming them without shame felt like unlocking a window in a stuffy room. 3. The Peace Fund. That evening, I returned to the account I had renamed the Peace Fund. I transferred another small amount, just $20, and added a note, for breathing room. It wasn't a savings plan or an emergency stash. It was a reminder that I am allowed to choose calm on purpose. Every time I add to it, I tell myself, you're not buying things, you're buying peace of mind. And slowly, that truth has begun to rewire my nervous system. The numbers are still the same, but they no longer speak in panic. They whisper possibility. 4. The quiet ledger. A few nights later, I started what I now call the quiet ledger. It's not about income or expenses. It's a record of emotional transactions. Each night, I write one honest line about my relationship with money that day. Today, I checked my balance and didn't flinch. Today, I bought dinner without guilt. Today, I spent less time worrying and more time living. At first, it felt silly. Then, after a week, I noticed the tone changing. The sentences grew softer. The self-criticism faded. The act of writing wasn't just documenting change, it was the change. When you spend to nourish, not to prove, money becomes gentle. That line came to me one night, uninvited but true. I underlined it. Maybe it's the closest thing to a mantra I've ever had. 5. The generosity check. Once a month I give something small away. A meal, a ride, a bit of time. Not out of abundance, but out of alignment. Because the moment I share, I remind myself that I am not trapped in fear's economy. I belong to the cycle of giving and receiving, the oldest, most reliable currency of all. Generosity is not the opposite of saving. It's the confirmation that you already have enough to give. That night I placed my wallet back on the counter. The leather gleamed in the lamplight, humble and dignified, as if it too had softened from all the learning. I whispered, "Thank you for carrying me." And for the first time in years, the word enough didn't sound like settling. It sounded like peace. It's evening again. The rain has stopped and the house hums with that comfortable silence that only arrives after a long, honest day. The wallet sits where it always does, on the kitchen counter beside a cooling cup of tea, worn and familiar. For years it used to glare at me like a judgment, a reminder of what I hadn't yet achieved. Tonight it just waits, patient, unthreatening. I open it one last time before bed. Inside there's less cash than I'd like, fewer cards than most people carry. But the sight doesn't sting anymore. The photo of my younger self is still there, slightly faded at the corners. I run my thumb across it gently. He used to believe that success would feel like exhaling after years of holding his breath. But now I know you don't wait to exhale. You practice it every day. I take a deep breath. The air feels light, uncomplicated. For a long time I thought peace was something you earned after you fixed everything. After the debts were gone, after the job stabilized, after the fear disappeared. But peace was never waiting at the end. It was sitting quietly in the middle, asking to be noticed between each anxious heartbeat. That's what Maslow meant, I think. The point of safety isn't to escape life's uncertainty. It's to stand in it without losing yourself. The kettle clicks softly, reminding me to refill my cup. I smile at the sound, the same one that used to fill the background of my worry. Now it sounds like company, like rhythm, like proof that I am living. I take the wallet, hold it open for a moment, and slip a small note inside. Just one line. You are safe enough to rest. Not a mantra, not a goal, just a truth I need to remember on the days I forget. Because I still forget. I still check the numbers sometimes and feel my stomach twist. I still worry about the future, about what I can't control. But the difference is this: I don't scold myself for it anymore. I remind myself that being human means sometimes doubting your own progress. And then I do something small to come back. Light a candle, make tea, or write one quiet sentence in my ledger. That's how peace grows. Not through grand plans, but through tiny acts of remembering. I've learned that financial well-being isn't really about money. It's about the relationship between fear and faith. How you hold both without letting either take over. It's about treating your resources as something sacred, not scarce. When I think of my daughter's question, "Are we rich?" I finally know how to answer. Yes, we are. Not because of what's in the bank, but because of what we've learned to keep inside. Patience, kindness, gratitude, and the willingness to begin again every day. Outside, the city hums, lights flicker. Someone laughs 2 apartments over. Life keeps moving, and so do I. I place the wallet down gently, zip it closed. The sound is soft, like a door shutting behind a long journey. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm trying to control my life.
I feel like I'm in conversation with it.
Learning, listening, forgiving, starting over. The wallet is still old, still worn, but it doesn't symbolize fear anymore. It symbolizes trust, the kind you build quietly, transaction by transaction, breath by breath. I turn off the lights. The moonlight catches the edge of the leather, glinting faintly, a reminder that even what's used and tired can still shine. Maybe wealth was never about what fills your hands. Maybe it was always about what frees your heart. And as I walk to bed, I carry that softness with me, not as a goal to reach, but as a peace I finally allow myself to keep.